Greetings, adventurer, and welcome to D&D 101 here on the Bardic Quest YouTube channel. This series of videos is for the new player, the person who is D&D curious that wants to get in on D&D and not necessarily sure where to start. In this particular video, we are going to cover one of the core basic things of Dungeons & Dragons, which is essentially how to play. Because when you look at the D&D rulebooks, you take a look at them and realize that the three main core rules as they're described, which are the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual, total about 1,000 pages, which is quite the undertaking to learn how to play a game. But actually, the game itself is deceptively simple, and that's what we're going to cover in today's video. These are the 3 steps that every single D&D game will follow on some level. What are these 3 steps? Step 1, when you're playing the game, the Dungeon Master describes to the players where they are, what is going on around them. They will describe what your player character can see, smell, hear, touch, everything. They might describe, for example, a long corridor with black and white marble tiles that extends about 60 feet in front of you. As you follow down this corridor, you come to a T-junction. Shortly down the left-hand corridor, you can already see there is a white marble door. And in the right-hand corridor, you can see there is a black marble door. At that point, we move to step 2, where the player describes what their character is doing in response to the environment and the events that the DM just described. For example, you might say to the Dungeon Master, my character is going to go and listen at the black marble door to see if I can hear anybody on the other side. And another player might say, actually, DM, I'd like to go and check out the white marble door, but I'm going to open it and get through there and see what's in that room. At which point, it then moves to step 3, where the Dungeon Master would adjudicate and narrate the result. This comes in 2 phases. So first of all, the Dungeon Master will decide whether or not there is a probability or a chance you might not succeed at what you're trying to achieve. In these cases, the Dungeon Master might say to the player going to the white marble door, actually, yes, this door is unlocked, so yes, you can open it. And you see a room full of angelic figures offering you gifts. Or they might say, actually, no, that door is locked, so you can't open it. To the player character looking at the black marble door, they might determine, actually, they're listening at the door, and so there's a possibility that they might not be able to hear anything, not necessarily because there's not anything there, but because they just might not have that good hearing. They would say to that player, actually, I'm going to need you to give me a perception check, which is a type of D20 test in which you roll a 20-sided dice and add what is called a modifier. This will be based on your perception skill. So let's say, for argument's sake, that this player character has a +4 in their perception. So they'll roll a d20 and they might roll a 10 on the dice, adding that 4 to give them a total of 14. That might be enough for the Dungeon Master to determine that the player character can hear what is on the other side of that door, and in this case, you can hear a bunch of kobolds nattering to one another. Or, alternatively, if the player character rolled a 1, therefore adding their +4 and only getting a 5, the Dungeon Master might determine that's not going to be high enough to hear what's going on the other side, and so the DM simply narrates, you don't hear anything on the other side. And then, after all of that has played out, the Dungeon Master will simply then ask, once again, what do you do? And this is where we begin to rinse and repeat this cycle. To recap, step 1, the DM will narrate what's going on around you, what you can see, hear, etc. The player in step 2 will then describe to the Dungeon Master what they do in response, and then the Dungeon Master will determine whether or not you need to roll any dice to determine success or not, and describe the outcome, whether that is success or failure. And then we move back to step 1, where they are narrating what is going on around you and passing the proverbial ball back to the player to decide what they're going to do next. So it becomes a cycle. And that, at its basic level, makes Dungeons & Dragons a very easy game to get in on without necessarily having to know too much in the way of the rules, outside of perhaps building their character But even then, the Dungeon Master might give you a pre-generated character so that you don't even have to worry about that. So it makes Dungeons & Dragons very easy to pick up. Because what that means is that you only really ever have to respond to what the Dungeon Master is describing to you, because a good Dungeon Master will then be able to guide you as to what rules you're having to utilize at any one stage. It's a way that I have encouraged and taught many players by simply just saying, what do you want to do? And then I can guide a new player on what dice to roll, which is normally going to be, in all honesty, a d20. But we'll come to that in another video. So that is really basically it. Those are the 3 steps to playing any game of Dungeons & Dragons. And again, that is true for whatever scenario it is that you're playing in this instance, whether that be exploring a dungeon, exploring the wilderness, even combat to an extent. Combat has a very structured system, but it still follows that same structure of description, declaration, further narration, and adjudication. I hope you found that video helpful, particularly if you are a new Dungeons & Dragons player. And if you haven't done so already, do hit that like button to let YouTube know that you found this video helpful. And of course, subscribe to the channel as we delve deeper into D&D 101 and also all of the other videos that we're putting out, including actual play, where you can see Dungeons & Dragons in action. Thanks very much for tuning in, my friends, and I will catch you next time.